I use a mixture of Harman's watercolours, and then I use Winsor & Newton gouache and these bad boys. So the incredibly boring step you have to do at the start is tape the corners so you don't blast watercolour everywhere. So you can see here I'm just laying down some watercolours, putting in another colour to make a gradient, and you can see it's okay if you go over the actual painting where you're going to do the actual painting. So you mix up some gouache. I use purple here, but I think I put way too much water with it. Because it's a little bit transparent down the side, which you can kind of see through in the final piece. A little bit of the gradient coming through on the top right hand side. A big tip is always mix your paints with lots of white. That way it's easy to make darker values and to finish your sentence with an upwards inflection. So here I've mixed a lot of white into this and used very little water, so it really has a stronger opacity than the purple, and it can sit on top of the colour without destroying or reactivating the gouache underneath it. Gouache is amazing, but it's really easy to re-wet a surface you're working on and have it sort of liquefy and start smudging with your colour over the top. It's just adding really watered down ink to make a wash and make some shadows on the teeth and on the eye. Then you just dry off your brush to remove any excess watercolour. Again, this is pretty dry gouache, so it will go over our gradient on the sides without any issues. And it'll be nice and opaque, so it really covers it. The annoying thing with gouache is it's really easy to mix two colours and think they look the same. And then when you start painting, it comes out a lot darker, which was the intention here, but it's confusing when it's on your palette and you can't discern just how different it is. So I normally aim to mix on the palette what sort of looks like the colour that's already on the painting, and it will definitely be darker than that when it dries. This is just dry brushing in some highlights with really thick, unwatered down paint. Then adding in a shadow value. So this is easy to do when you've made your base color, purple in this case, mixed with quite a bit of white. So all you have to do is just start mixing the color again and put a lot less white in there. I'd normally advise doing that to get a darker color rather than mixing in black, because you end up with a really shit muddy color. Drawing some nice big pepperoni tatties, because you have the intellect of a child. And then I'm using a nice long sort of thin brush here to add in the outlines. It's a little bit tricky to control, but once you get used to it, it's actually super useful for doing long straight lines. Holds an absurd amount of ink and you really don't need to keep topping it up too much. And it's pretty good for variations in line width. It's not amazing on really short, sharp corners, which you can see on those points on the collar, but I can work with that with a bit of practice. You also want to make sure your camera runs out of memory at some point and completely drops off and stops recording what you're doing, so that the viewer sees a huge jump forward in progress. So now I'm just using a pen to outline the pupil, which is a super tricky shape, so it's better to play it safe. Adding some lines to make it a little bit more interesting. Sharpening up a lot of the lines with the sharper Winsor & Newton brush so you can get in there. And then adding in some white highlights on top of our existing highlights to just create a little bit more depth. And removing the tape, which is incredibly satisfying until you start ripping the paper, which happened very slightly in the top right corner.